Welcome to Everything is Learning, a space for curiosity, growth, and figuring things out as we go. We're glad you're here. Let's get into it. We're back! Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 5. We're talking about raising humans, so we're just going to kick it right off. So, Marissa, what does raising humans mean to you?
Whew. Well, it's a big responsibility, that's for sure. And it feels loaded, like the fact that I am a human that is in charge of other humans. Like sometimes I go to the doctor's office and I'm surprised that they let me still walk out with them, but I do love them. I couldn't imagine not. It's weird to be responsible for the survival of other beings. Like that's a immense pressure. I don't think I fully realized when we thought about having children. And they really are little humans. I was actually looking at my older son last night while he was sleeping, and I was like, oh, you look a lot like me, and you seem a lot bigger than what you should be for 5 years old. And then I looked at my youngest one, and I'm like, oh, my baby is not such a baby anymore. But I'd be curious, what does it mean to you?
All of that. Yeah, I think the reason that I was curious about learning more when it comes to raising humans and talking about it with you is because it's such a huge part of our lives right now. Because we're newer parents and our kids are young and we're figuring it out. But also there's so much to learn. So like raising humans, I think also has to do with raising ourselves because it's all our first time here. And when I was
Yeah.
sitting and thinking about it, I was thinking about, that moment when you first heard Miles cry.
Well, it took a minute, but yes.
I remember feeling like the person I was, like, left my body and the person who I became came. Like, they
Wow.
almost, like, shook hands and, like, passed like the torch. It was just this very like otherworldly feeling. And yes, I had two at the same time, so it was different and they were both born the same minute, which is also
That's
very different.
wild.
But it
They were?
it's
I don't even think I knew that.
yep, born the same exact minute. And it rarely if ever happens with twins, apparently. I didn't know that.
Of course.
And I have twins and like Pat has twins, like people who are twins who are like, "Oh, are they twins?" And they'll come up and they'll be like, "Oh, like when were they born? Like how far apart?" And I'm like, "Same minute." And they're like, "No way, I'm a twin and we were born like 20 minutes apart." I'm like, "Wow, like I didn't you just don't know what you don't know." And that's the other part of raising humans. Is like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's my first time. So as old as my children are, that's how old I am as a mother. Like, and
Yes.
I
True.
think that that's really
Well
important
said.
for people as they're learning, when they become responsible for other people is like, okay, if you become like we were both teachers, we were both coaches, we're all these different things, and then we became parents. So, like, if you're coaching for the first time, you've learned all these things, you've done all these things, but until you put it into practice, you really don't know what you don't know.
True.
And you can only anticipate so much. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
complicated part of us raising ourselves as humans and other people raising us and us raising it's just rooted in constant learning. And if you're not constantly curious, even when you're burned out, then you just get stagnant and you get in this place where you can't really even move or do anything.
Wow.
And I think that, like, there's a lot of healing and growth and unlearning is one of the biggest pieces I feel like of parenting and raising humans that people don't understand is like when you make a connection with someone who is younger than you learn a lot of things that you don't agree with anymore and you have to unlearn and relearn. Um,
Or like how different the approach is. And not for
right.
nothing, being a parent and totally feeling insecure in my role at various points, especially because my oldest is non-speaking. And although my youngest is verbal, doesn't formulate all the words or in a means that you can understand. And I know you're still in that teetering point, but regardless, when you don't know what you don't know, so the unlearning piece falls present in my daily life where I feel like when we were upset as children, mom and dad gave us space. And now I feel like I'm unlearning the need to give, at least at this age.
Oh, okay, so when
Um,
you when you say space, I
Send
hear
us to our
rejection.
room. Sorry. Okay. Yes.
I hear,
Right.
"Go to the corner."
Right, exactly. No, but that's exactly it. Like
But it is
it's a
space.
timeout almost.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. That was a really
Sorry, I was
generous
like,
way
"Did you
to
get
say
space? Were you invited to go somewhere?"
no,
Like,
to my room. Yeah.
right.
No, but
You're
like
invited to your room.
now if my child is having a meltdown, it's like I need to be present in it, but it's so triggering for me because
Yeah.
I don't sit well when people are upset. It like raises my anxiety. And so
Mhm.
I have to be really mindful of that. And like the over touching or to overstimulation
Oh,
of
yeah.
being touched out, that was like not something. So when you talk about unlearning, I don't remember our parents talking about that part. I don't remember experiencing that. It was like, okay, you go to your room and then I have my space and you have your space, right?
Yeah.
That was how
You
we
deal with your stuff
coped.
on your own. Right.
Right, and that's not at all how I'm approaching it because my kids don't have the words, they don't have the coping strategy or they're developing that. It's not that they
Right.
don't have it, they're developing it. And so when you and I were bouncing ideas off of what do we wanna make this season about, I was really excited. Lots of reasons were selfish to me because I am a curious person by nature,
Mhm.
and I very much am of the belief where although I'm sure you and I both received a ton of unsolicited parenting advice, I actually want to solicit more parent advice, especially from people who are raising humans for longer than I have been on that journey,
Right.
because I need a sanity check a
Yeah.
lot of the time. And I
Yes.
appreciate that you you are that for me most times.
Oh, ditto.
Also like validation, something that you might have tried or I might have tried. I know I'm slightly embarrassed to use this example, but like if someone had told me that at some point in my parenting journey or my journey of raising humans, I would be cleaning up poop off of a screen, I might have
Oh.
rethought that.
Yeah, I remember
um
that. I remember that day. Yeah,
so
I
to
mean,
your point about learning and unlearning and all of that, and then a safe space to reflect. Like all the guests we've spoken to have been really amazing, and whether regarding raising humans or not, this has become a safe space to reflect. And then I've also appreciated, especially during um, the episodes where we talked about grief, that I can mourn the unrealistic or unrealized expectations that I had of what I thought raising humans would be like, and it
yeah.
didn't pan out that way. But yes to the unlearning. But to your point about space and all of that, what have you unlearned as a parent?
I mean, I don't think it's a secret that especially in our family that I was always a very opinionated and strong-willed child because I wanted people to be accountable because it felt weird that children are supposed to be accountable for their feelings and their actions and their mistakes, but adults didn't have to be.
Oh my
And
gosh. I
that
really resonate
triggered
with that.
yeah, and that triggered a
Not at
whole
the
lot of
time.
adults in our lives.
Yeah, for sure. And they're still triggered because,
Still.
we're trying to hold the president accountable. We're trying to hold the administration accountable. We're trying to hold other people. Like now we're adults.
But I
And those people are just because they're older, they're still adults.
so
And
it's
yeah,
really interesting that you say that though, because what I have learned since becoming a parent is that the generation that our parents are from, they did what their parents said, and if you didn't, you would be like it was corporal punishment was the answer, right?
absolutely. Nope. Correct.
So then they carried on most, not all, but most, carried on what their parents did and just tried that because they didn't know another way. Fine. We now are of the generation where we're like, that didn't work for you or your parents, so we're going to give this a try.
And you
Um,
really screwed us all over too.
right. And you talked about those generations being triggered by accountability. Of
Hmm.
course, they've never practiced that muscle. They've never had the opportunity to do that with their own parents. So they just say, "Oh, my parents did the best they could." Okay, well, our generation is saying, okay, we did the best, they did the best that they could with what they knew and what
Mhm.
they chose at the time. But that doesn't mean that it was right for me. It just doesn't. It doesn't mean that that was what was right for me. And what I've unlearned is that it's okay that I don't follow what they did. And it's okay that as a child, I was told things that were not true about myself,
Mm.
and that I don't need to hold on to those things. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that we've connected with on social media who say those things and need to hear, like, I was a kid. That wasn't my responsibility. And when you talk about like distance or having room, they've found statistically and scientifically that not giving space helps children to figure out how to regulate better.
Sure, because
Um,
they can see how you do it.
right. And I think that that's something that my partner has unlearned too, is in particular, is like, you know, you run away from conflict, but no one teaches you how to deal with conflict with kids, which is also
Mm.
really interesting, and how the dysregulation and the overstimulation can be too much at times, and how to deal with that. Because I think if we look back on what our parents or our grandparents or even our great grandparents did, a lot of times it was just overstimulation was not allowed, you know what I mean? Like, it just
That's true.
wasn't. And if they got overstimulated, then you handled it, and a lot of it came down to compliance, and I'm really
Sure.
struggling right now with the fact that I don't want to send my kids to school because
Mm.
a majority of schools are the Prussian model of education, and they deem compliance as success, and I don't. I don't think compliance is success. I think it's control. I think it's an illusion of control.
Which I'm actually really glad that we're talking about because I know you and I have discussed this separately, but to your point about compliance is the success. I also would then posit the way in which I'm going to approach education has fundamentally changed with my children because I know my
Oh,
oldest son requires the routine and we don't have the means to homeschool or unschool or do an alternate especially on opposite shifts just because that's what my partner and I do to figure out childcare situations and all of that. So the notion of sending our children through the Prussian model both because they're autistic and really thrive in a routine or are children with autism and the piece that for me is I will treat grades differently
oh,
than when we were raised, where like, the reason I we had a family dog was because I achieved certain grades, right? And
and I got a
not for
mirror.
nothing, that was very validating for me, and I wanted to achieve, and there was some drive to do so, but I don't think that the way in which I will view whether my kids are successful will be based on their report card.
Yeah, I
Largely
love that.
because I don't necessarily know that either will carry the, um, certain diploma that follows the traditional schooling. It will
Okay.
be more life skills, but also because I don't think that academia is a measure of true intelligence.
Yeah.
And that, we see that more and more now, even with people who haven't graduated with a college diploma,
Mhm.
being able to make billions of dollars. So, what I
Give that
think
shit away, by the way.
yeah, right. But to your point about the notion that why like what you've unlearned and how you're approaching it while you're raising your own humans and how that really differs, it's like a big deal. This is not an easy thing that parents are encountering or facing, and largely because we have a malignant narcissist in charge, but because to your point, the generation that's above us, they followed what their parents said because that was what was expected, and so now they figure we're gonna do the same, and we're not. And I do recognize that at some point they were the scared concerned, hopefully loving individual like you and I are for their own humans they were raising, and they were just doing what they knew. But at the same time, I think I appreciate the capacity to like, although I think social media can be terrible, it's very validating to see other people understand that what didn't feel good for us,
Huh.
we can change, we can do something different. And that there's unity in that and there's movement behind that. And that's bringing me joy for raising humans. And like, especially there's this woman, she fascinates me. I wish I could be best friends with this woman. She has such a unique and fresh approach. She has to be one of the most intelligent people, I think, because she thinks so creatively. And I'll give you this one thing that has resonated with me, and I'm trying to find ways to weave it in for birthdays, which are always going to be, I imagine, a challenge because I don't think my oldest child will ever want to be somewhere he doesn't want to be or is very particular about the things he's interested in, is that lots of people feel put off if my child doesn't play with the thing or engage with the thing that they got him. So what she did was, instead of you bringing a gift, I'll get the gifts for my child because I know what he or she will like. You bring food and we'll all share in the food together. That way I don't have to worry about the dietary restrictions or dietary preferences. We can have a favorite meal of said individual together, and you grab a wrapped present on your way in so it still looks like you came, and then we're celebrating because your presence matters, right? You showing up matters. And I was like, that is the freaking most brilliant thing I've ever heard. And then the other thing is holidays. And because we celebrate most holidays at your house, I'm very grateful. But sometimes we might end up having to leave earlier, like as my youngest gets older or as your kids get older and the developmental gap potentially widens, there will be dissonance of like something that they're really excited about, want to participate in, but a meltdown happens. And so we have to leave. Coupling the departure from something that will be challenging with something equally motivating is such a good idea. And then having a pseudo celebration after the fact. So, like, think Friendsgiving, but something that you know only your kids will like. The way in which it's been shared around on social media and conceptualized by millennials is the meal in Talladega Nights at the table where they have like Pizza Hut and Taco
Oh,
Bell
yeah.
and KFC and all the things, right? Do something like that, but for your kids that you know your kids will like. And then they'll be excited about that. Then they won't feel like they missed out as much. And again, these are things that like I probably could have come up with if I wasn't sleep deprived, stressed beyond measure,
Right.
worried about World War III, right? Like
Yeah.
working full time, being a mom, right? They're probably things I could have come up with, but I don't have the space to be that creative. So I love that we can learn from people, like I can learn from people like her. And
Oh, I
that's what's
agree.
bringing me joy. But what brings, despite the fact that there's so much broken in the world, I know that there's things that bring you joy. We laugh a lot. What's
No, yeah.
bringing you joy right now?
Well, before I do that, the first thing that I thought of, I think that birthdays should be whatever people want. So, like for me this year, I want my Lisa Frank alien cake, and I'm really pumped about it. And I also this year just don't happen to want to go out and do like a big shindig. Like I just don't. I'm really happy being at home. My birthday's on Easter this year. I want to celebrate Easter with our family and I just want to chill and be with my kids. So you're talking about joy. What brings me joy is we do a lot of music in our house. Um,
Yeah.
and my kids are trying new things, which is great. They're doing like piano and karate and swim. Um, and we're trying to figure out how to pay for those things.
Yeah, it doesn't
And
help that you have to basically donate a kidney to pay for gas anymore, so
right, that too. But in terms of joy, it's really just like the small things for me. Like I wake up with a few intentions for the day. And I sometimes they coordinate with it. Like today they had karate, so I was like, okay, let's get a treat afterwards. And then other times it's like, okay, at some point today, I want to make them laugh, or I want to do an arts and crafts that I know that they would love to do, or something like that. It has to be small. And it doesn't have to last long, but to me, I think I'm at the age too where, or they're at the age too, where it's like right now they won't remember all of this, but I will.
Mhm.
So capturing those moments and recording them however I can, that's really important to me. And I look back at like our whole old home movies on like Christmas and stuff, and I really treasure those moments. And now with technology, as much as I don't love it, I'm really grateful that I have 10,562 videos and like 4
So
million
true.
pictures of my children. So
I
there's that.
can I just point out, I love exactly what you said is just because they won't remember doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, and, like, you'll remember,
Yeah.
because I actually saw something on, like, that there was this idea that if a child won't remember it or recall it, then it's not worthwhile or worth spending money on, and it was a parent who was justifying, and I loved the parent's reaction. "Why would you take your two-year-old to Disney when they're not gonna remember that?" And,
I was
like,
just going to say something about that.
well,
Yeah.
and the reality is, I love that you said you're gonna remember it, but
Yeah, it's
also
for
they're
me. It's
gonna
not for
remember
them.
what they felt. It
Right.
doesn't remember that they don't remember the specific interaction with Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse or their favorite character. They're gonna remember how it made them feel, and
Right.
that is something that is ingrained that you will miss out on if all you're thinking about is what are they gonna remember or what are they not. My goodness, what I feel bad for that individual because they must have been robbed of so much joy in their youth.
Well, no, it's not even just that though, right? It's also the fact that like so our cousin Jackie, she's the one that said to me, like we went on cruises and we took them to Disney, and I guess she had on the background of her phone when her daughter Paisley ran through Magic Kingdom for the first time, and you see her in her little Cinderella dress and then the Cinderella castle. And she was like, that moment wasn't for her, that was for me. And I never
That's
forgot that
beautiful.
because but it's true. But who do you know that's above 60 who would say that to you? I don't know anybody. That's not a thought
Mm-mm.
that they
A
had.
grandparent who really wanted to dote on their grandchild,
Yeah, well,
perhaps.
grandparents are something else, aren't they?
Yeah, perhaps. I know. But yeah, I know.
I love those
It
grandparent videos where it's like, parents being like, "You didn't do that for me," and the mom, the grandmother walks in with like a cotton candy maker, and she's like, "You didn't even get me a McDonald's toy." It's
I know. Yeah, right,
oh, it's
exactly.
too
We
funny.
have food at home, right? And then but
Right,
so on wants it. Yeah, no, I totally get it. And you know what?
grandparents.
Like I hope I'm excited to be that level of a grandparent too, is that but I think the way in which you framed it is I totally could appreciate, like, the feeling joy, even if they don't remember it, I will, but
Mm.
it's almost like this treasure, like, you have to work through all this trash, but there's those glimmers of treasure, and that's so nice that you said that, and, like, sometimes I dread getting my kids in the car. One of my favorite things to do, and this is really more of a gift for me than anyone else, is every year thus far, they'll age out soon, but every year thus far, there's a local play place, we love it, that does Mother's Day photo shoots with an
Mm.
amazing photographer. She's wonderful to work with. Anyway, she does these Mother's Day shoots, and I love going because it's oftentimes the only time I'm really in the photos. But also they're nice and like we dress up. And let me tell you, for the 15 minutes we get, it takes 3 hours to plan, plus all the coordination and making sure we have the right snacks and that it's in the location and they're wearing something comfortable and we match and getting up and making sure we make it on time and all that jazz, but, like, the end product is something, like, I feel grateful for. It's something that I treasure, and, yeah, it's kinda like how they joke about how mothers forget about the pain of childbirth because that's if we remembered it, then we wouldn't wanna do it again. It's like, when I see that beautiful picture I don't think about, although just rehashing all of the plans that it took, I don't actually typically nestle on and, focus on all the pain that went through it. I just focus on, like, what happened and, like, the fun that they have after we get the picture, and the fact that I actually have all of my family in one frame, because
Right.
that feels somewhat miraculous at times. Um,
Mhm.
and I would love to give my children more opportunity to be an active participant in how they're being raised, and I actually would tout that you do a really good job of this. And for our listeners, I would love if you would weigh in on where you involve your kids in how you're raising your humans, because you do seek out their input, and I wish that more people did that. I think
That's really kind, thank you.
if we had that, things like, it never really occurred to me you were talking about compliance, it never really occurred to me to say no until you and Chelsea did it. Didn't
Chelsea
even know that was an
perfected no.
option. You know how like, give you the fake choice, right? Do you
Yeah,
wanna to wear the blue pajamas or the red pajamas, but you're wearing pajamas? Yes and no. No was not a choice. It's
right.
this way or this way, which way you going, right?
That's
Like, that's
birth
all.
order too, though, like, you can't you know what I mean? Like,
Perhaps. I'm getting down a tangent. Please talk about how you seek out your children's input. Clearly they did seek my input, but in a way that made me realize there was no
yeah, there
no
wasn't
choice.
real they weren't really looking for your input, they were like, "What of this that I'm giving you do you really want?"
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And it's a form in my mind, it's a form of manipulation, but sometimes parents have to do that, and I don't shame any parent who's like, "Hey, listen, if we have to get in the car and you're not getting in the car and we need to get in the car right now, you can have this or this." Like, I'm one thing that I've learned is that children, especially strong-willed children like I was,
Mhm,
a lot of it has to do with control and, equity and equality. And I do think that all of those things are very different.
hmm,
And I think going back to the fact that this is not necessarily about raising kids, it's about raising humans. One of the
hmm,
things that we need to think about is if an adult can't regulate, why should a child?
hmm,
If an adult can't reflect, why should a child? And it goes back to expectations, but there should always be an expectation of autonomy. And I learned that being an educator, and I learned that when I went into a classroom as a coach, because I had been a coach before I was in education. I feel like I was a coach longer, even though I did Sunday school and things like that when we were younger. And I feel like I think I was 11 or 12 the first time I had an experience with someone who was moderately autistic. And I just remember thinking how much they needed to participate in their learning and how much they needed to participate, even though they could not speak um, or had selective mutism. They decided things that they needed, and when I stopped trying to get them to comply because the group needed to stay together, and I started saying, like, let's follow what this person is doing and see where it takes us and make it more of an adventure, there wasn't any more dysregulation. There wasn't any more, like, it's just about teaching kids autonomy and advocacy. And the only reason that I bring that to parenting, coaching, being around younger people, being around older people, and being open and curious to learning from them, is really I give that background to becoming an educator because the place that I learned the most was in front of a classroom. It wasn't as a student.
yeah,
It
teaching
really
someone
wasn't.
else, yeah.
It was being an educator and being responsible for other people's the thing that they love most in the world, or at least should love most in the world, besides themselves and their partner if they have one and all of that. But um, if you don't see children as a gift, how can you see yourself as a gift? Because at one point you were a child. So I think that that's the complexities of raising humans and raising ourselves is that we really need to start with a foundation And in all honesty, that foundation throughout my entire life has changed
Mm.
at every age pretty much. And I don't really like I always have to ask my husband how old I'm turning, and he usually figures out how old he was, then how old you are, and then how old I am. And I know Kyle's in the middle somewhere, but that's like I don't really pay attention to that because I'm paying attention to, am I the person I was yesterday? Hopefully not.
Mm.
And I don't think that people have taken the time or have had learning mentors to have taught them that.
Mm.
And I figured that out on my own, the hard way. And I used to always hate that phrase, like, you have to learn the hard way. No, I don't. I just needed somebody there. I really just needed somebody there to be like, hey, what about this? Or be curious about what I thought. And that's the importance of autonomy to me. Um, and I found that in coaching too. Like, if you ask the players, hey, do you want to be like, do you want to be the head of your division? Or do you want to just have fun and play? And sometimes it would be, let's just have fun and play and enjoy ourselves. Sometimes it was, we want to be at the top, but we want to have fun and play at the same time. And sometimes it's, we'll do anything to get to the top. Um, and people don't want to hear that. Like athletic directors don't want to hear that. They want you to be at the
Right.
top, you
For
know?
sure.
Um,
Yeah, their motivation is different than your motivation, but that's why I love
yeah.
Ted Lasso so much. That said, I also love that you called out, like, why is it the hard way? It's just not your way. Is that what makes it the hard way? And
Right.
I actually appreciate that because I learned something that I don't think we've talked about, but I wanna make sure we bring up is that while raising humans, I learn from my humans as much as I think they learn from me.
If not more.
And for sure, and some of those unrealized expectations have turned into something even more beautiful than
Mhm.
I was expecting, and that feels like a gift, and that often brings me joy. But I am curious because we're gonna ask all of our guests this, and you crafted this question, which I think is a beautiful one. I'm curious your take on this is,
Mm.
since we believe that raising humans is one of the most powerful learning spaces, for the reasons that I just mentioned, among more, what lessons do you hope that we start teaching more consciously and collectively around the world to make permanent and positive change?
I would have said, um, autonomy and safety, because I think kids in the world today are not safe.
Mm,
I think that people are not safe. I think that even as adults, it's sometimes hard to be safe with ourselves.
mm,
And I think that teaching people how to unlearn things, but not coercively, just like presenting curiosity would be really helpful.
yeah,
But
yes.
honestly, I think another one, which maybe seems like more of a first world thing, is repair. I don't think people know
Ugh,
how to repair anything. I don't think that people come with vulnerability to conversations enough, um, and curiosity and just learning how to repair in general, I think is really tough. Just you and I have talked about it a lot recently, and I think that people don't understand the value of repair either. It's so easy to do in that you say you acknowledge what you did, you acknowledge, how it must have made somebody feel. You take responsibility, and then you tell somebody how you'd like to move forward. And
sure.
there's so much value in that because I think for generations, people didn't apologize. And repair is not an apology. An apology is part of repair. But I think that that could really change the world. I do. I think saying like, "Hey, listen, I messed up. I'm really sorry." Um, and meaning it and then changing because I think that and I always told like particularly in middle school, I'm sorry means I'm going to try my absolute hardest to never do it ever again. That's what an apology means.
Mm.
So, yeah, long-winded answer, but I think those would be my answers. How about you?
I really like it. I'd love to steal that answer, but I'll build off of it. I really think kindness,
Mm,
is a key piece, empathy. So and I don't mean empathy in just like to say the word. I really do mean to try and see things from another person's perspective. I have actually been trying to do this proactively with people in my life who disagree, or there's dissonance in what they believe to be true and what I believe to be true. Um, Especially because, where we are now or where we got as a society or with raising humans didn't just happen overnight, right? It was
Mhm.
like a bunch of little small things. And that action is greater than like action, it leads to impact. So it's not enough to say and want and be intentional about that. You actually have to do it. So as far as like the I hope we're teaching humans and people raising humans is that showing up, being kind, regulating yourself,
Mhm.
and um, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Those would be things that I think you did say those. Mine are all part of what you described. And so I think, though, it really does come from a place where you need to be curious and vulnerable
Uh-huh.
and want to learn. And if you feel like you have met the point to where you have nothing left to learn,
Go to
I've
therapy.
uh, yes, sure. I love that. Thank
Please
you.
go to
Go to
therapy.
therapy. But on in that regard, one of the things that I go to therapy for is how to ease the burden of mental load I feel on a daily basis. And I'm looking forward to our listeners hearing all about that from our next guest. So stay tuned for more. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for spending your time with us at Everything is Learning. Keep being curious, keep learning, and we look forward to catching you again next time.